Hey, what's up everyone? According to the official patch announcement from Nikon, the update aims squarely at stability and performance improvements across all platforms, plus a heap of quality of life fixes that players have been pushing for since the last season drop. Right away, the headline here is performance and stability. The devs worked on vegetation culling, traffic spawn cost, vehicle shadow LODs, and general memory usage so the game behaves more consistently on long sessions. That translates into fewer stutters in dense areas, especially when you're cruising through the forested or high-detail city zones, and far fewer mysterious frame hitches when the game spawns traffic or new scenery as you speed along. You may not see a flashy wow number in an options menu, but the experience becomes smoother and less prone to sudden dips while you're racing or just driving around exploring. This update clearly wasn't a tiny hotfix either, because it touched a lot of the engine's background systems that most players never see but always feel. A big chunk of the patch targeted crashes and odd behavior that could completely kill a session. Multiplayer lobbies that would crash when people joined or left were addressed. Issues where the game could suddenly kick you back to the main menu when swapping controllers were fixed, and problems tied to browsing the online store without an owned vehicle were cleaned up. If you spend time racing online or hanging out in workshops, these fixes are huge. Before, you could be fully set up in a lobby only for one disconnect to ruin everything. Now, those specific scenarios have been smoothed out so sessions are far more reliable. Network stability was clearly one of the main goals here, and it shows. On the driving side of things, the AI and physics also received some quiet but important attention. The way AI cars handled drifts was adjusted so they look and behave more naturally, instead of snapping into awkward angles or feeling overly scripted. Several vehicles had specific fixes as well. Certain animations that weren't triggering correctly, like active wings or headlights, were corrected, and dashboard readouts on some cars were fixed, so gears and indicators now display properly. There were also balance-related tweaks where specific upgrades were removed from cars they didn't belong on, helping keep vehicle behavior more authentic. These are the kinds of changes you notice most if you regularly drive the same cars and care about realism. Steering wheel and controller users finally got some much-needed love, too. Logitech wheel users in particular had issues ranging from performance drops to outright crashes, and those problems were directly addressed. Wheel angle behavior was corrected on several setups, crashes related to certain non-true force wheels were fixed, and cockpit animations were adjusted so switching between wheel and controller doesn't break immersion. There are still notes for players using non-SDK wheels, but overall the experience should feel far more stable and predictable now. If you've spent hours tweaking force feedback just to fight the game, this update should feel like a breath of fresh air. PC players saw their own set of improvements. Multiple controllers can now be used at the same time. Certain visual options were reorganized, so higher quality effects sit where they make more sense, and an exploit related to alt-tabbing that could affect race times was shut down. Console players weren't left out either. On PlayStation and Xbox, HDR handling was simplified by relying on system-level settings instead of in-game sliders. Dynamic resolution behavior was improved, and controller disconnect issues that could throw you back to menus were resolved. It's clear the patch wasn't one-size-fits-all. Each platform got targeted fixes based on how players actually used the game. The open world itself also got a solid cleanup pass. Missing roads on the world map were restored, race previews that showed incorrect weather or surface conditions were fixed, and various points of interest that didn't trigger correctly were repaired. Character customization issues were addressed too, with clothing and accessories clipping far less often in lounges and menus. One particularly frustrating bug, where cars could fall through the world when using the return to road feature on small objects, was fixed, which alone can save players a ton of frustration. These small world fixes stack up quickly, making the entire map feel more reliable and polished. It's important to be clear about what this update is and isn't. This isn't a drop filled with new cars, races, or flashy features. Instead, it's a foundational update focused on making the existing experience smoother, more stable, and more consistent across long play sessions. For players who've been dealing with crashes, input issues, or immersion-breaking bugs, this patch directly targets those pain points. It also sets the stage for future content by tightening up the core systems that everything else relies on. So when you load back in, what you should feel is fewer interruptions, more consistent performance, better behavior from AI and vehicles, and a world that simply behaves the way it's supposed to. It's the kind of update that doesn't shout at you, but after a few hours of driving, racing, and exploring, you realize you're thinking less about problems and more about the road ahead. And that's exactly what an update like this is meant to do.